Good morning. We'll wait a few minutes and see, give folks some chance to log on. We'll wait a few more minutes to see, give people a chance to get on here before we get started. This morning. Thank you for all for tuning in. I'm going to talk to you today about emergency advice for your business during the pandemic, what to say and do with all of your stakeholders. And let me show you what we're going to do today. And I want to this is a foible of mine, which is that I can't pay attention until I know where we're going. And so I'm gonna kind of give you a roadmap of what we're doing. And part of the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to talk about mindset a little bit at the outset, something that I've believe more and more in as I've done this more and more. And I can certainly understand if people get impatient, so I want to let you know we're going to get to some meatier stuff, but we're going to do some woo-woo stuff at the outset. Why should you listen to me? The fair question. I've been doing this a lot. I've been at this 20 years. I started in doing insolvency work and moved into franchising, helping franchisees restructure. And I've probably restructured more than $700 million in debt, and I've done hundreds of lease restructures. So I've seen this, and I've been in and out of recessions a few times. And when we come out of recessions, I help clients do upside stuff, buy things, develop things. And so I've seen both sides of this. I've confirmed Chapter 11 plans. I've closed entire markets of franchises. I've been there, and I'm here to tell you that I've seen it. And if you can hang with me, I've got some advice for you on kind of how this is going to work and what's going to come next. First thing I want to talk to you a little bit is about mindset. And the reason is, as I get folks coming into my office, working with us and doing restructuring work, I find that I spend about half my time managing their outlook and their mindset. And the folks that I can get their mindset straight are the folks that are going to get there. And one of the things that I like to do at the outset is help establish some goals and some direction for people. And so we're trying to plan and play to win as opposed to not lose. So let's take a look at where we've been. We've been here before. This is not new. I know it feels new. I know it feels different. And I know that if you've got a small business, you're looking at your bank balance, you're not sleeping, you're calculating your expenses on paper and then checking it in your head, you're stuck at home, and you are miles away in your mind with your worry about your work. But here are all of the recessions and financial setbacks that the country has suffered since we started keeping track. And one thing is true, they all end, and at the end, behavior and people come back. And so we ran this webinar before for this set of folks, and the point I made with them is that, hey, you're all part of these systems, and these systems are still going to be here when this is all over. Let's try to help be sure that you're going to be here too. And I think that this is applicable today, whether you're in one of these systems or not. Business and consumers and all of that's still going to be around. All right, want to give yourself a pat on the back for actually doing what it is that you're doing, and I want to point this out. You are doing the things that have made you successful all along by showing up here today, and it doesn't look like the same thing. You don't recognize it yet, but this is what it takes to hang in there, getting on webinars, getting information, planning, having a plan moving forward. And so let me tell you a little story. Pardon the woo-woo detour, but we're going to talk about Bob's Burgers and Mary's Burgers as an example. And we're going to walk through this because at the end of the day, people are still going to want to eat burgers, still going to go to IHOP, they're going to have to get their car fixed, they need their hair cut. And so let's talk about how you can be there. I want you to be like Mary in this story and not like Bob. So Mary's going to keep her cool, and Bob is not going to keep his cool. Mary's going to know that habits and customers come back, and she's going to plan, she's going to gather information, she's going to think for herself, she's not going to check the paper too much or social media, and she's going to focus on doing what she can do and controlling what she can control. Bob is just scared, and he's going to make emotional reactions, and he's not going to make thoughtful, judgment-based calls. Mary's going to make a plan. She's going to communicate with her stakeholders. Bob's just going to fall apart. And when this all comes back, and I know these are little cartoon drawings, but it really does serve to make my point, because this is how this has happened in the past, and it's how it's going to happen this time. Those that are left are going to see a surge in business when all the customers come back and the restrictions end. And that's sort of the first level of success when you come back. Second is Bob, who didn't plan, is going to be closed. So Bob's surging customers are not going to come back to Bob's. They're going to go to Mary's. That's the second level. Third, new customers are going to show up. People that just feel like getting out and having a burger, even though they haven't at your place or in a while. And so you can have that third level. And finally, if you're like most of my clients for the last 2 years, your issue has been hiring. And if you can make it to the end of this, keep focused, plan, communicate, you're going to be able to hire some great employees who are going to be looking for jobs. I want to give a thanks to the How to Manage folks for workshopping that little example with me. All right, when you are in financial distress, you want to be like Mary. You want to plan, and that's critical. And one of the things that's easy to get stuck thinking, well, you know, I make this budget, I make this plan. Nobody knows where this is going, and you know, what if I'm wrong? Let me take the worry out of that for you. You're going to be wrong. Your plan and your budget is going to be incorrect, and it's going to have to be changed. You need to do this for a couple of reasons. You need to do it to be someone who is planning and to hold yourself out as a planner. And that's going to help you with your stakeholders as you are showing them what you have in mind, showing them your plans, and then showing them how you've changed it and explaining why when it ultimately and invariably changes. And you need a plan so that you are actually making information-based decisions. And when you change something, you know you're changing it because you changed your plan, not because you changed the way that you feel about whatever is going on. When you plan and you make your budget, you need to be making a cash budget. And this is so critical because you have to show what you're actually going to spend and take in. And you can't use your profit and loss. You can't go into QuickBooks or Great Plains and dump off a profit and loss and send it off. And your accountant may or may not be of much help in this regard. Your accountant, the budget, the cash budget is going to be done without accounting conventions. And so, for example, on your profit and loss, your principal and interest for your loan doesn't show up, only your interest. That's because of the accounting convention, and that is appropriate. But on a cash budget, if you're going to pay principal and interest, you have to show the dollar amount that is going out the door. Flip side of that coin is you got to show any changes. If your payroll's changed, show that. If your rent has changed, you got to show that. And you don't want to get caught misleading someone by not reflecting something that's already been negotiated. It might be tempting to show your full principal and interest when you've gotten interest only, and show that to your landlord to make things look a little worse. That's going to bite you in the butt. You're going to be better off being transparent, being honest, and showing them the reality. And if you get caught later using numbers that you knew weren't right, it's going to make this harder. It's going to make you an unreliable source, and your stakeholders will question kind of what it is that you're doing with them. make sure that you're communicating. This is probably, in addition to mindset, this is probably the number one thing. And if I can get you to be reaching out to folks, you'll be better off. You don't have answers, say you don't have answers, but talk to them. And one of the things I tell my clients as they are going into distress situations is to focus on the fact that when you're talking to people, you're talking to people. So you might be on the phone with Chase or Wells Fargo or whatever bank or some large REIT and they're talking about your lease, but you're talking to a person who's going through this too. They've got a job, they've got their own issues and priorities, they're scared about things, and you need to be talking to them, listening to them, and addressing them, the people, and communicating with them. All right, let's talk about leases. The first wave of everyone going out after the shutdowns have started has been to talk to their landlords about their leases. And you need the lease for when you come back. And so staying in communication with your landlord and working something out is very critical. And the thing that I want to stress is I want you to get it in writing. And I want you to write down what's been agreed to. And I've got some considerations I want you to have in mind. And I'm going to show you on the next slide, I'm going to show you a form that you can get from us by clicking through. And in fact, I'll start talking here a little bit on this slide and then I'll move ahead. But I want you to detail all the abatements or postponements or deferrals of rent and what it is that you are or not paying. Are you still paying triple net? Write that down. You're not paying triple net? Write that down. Critically, I want you to make sure that your landlord is waiving late fees and any kind of defaults so that when you come back, your landlord is not holding all of the negotiation cards. And your landlord isn't coming back saying, well, now I'm willing to waive late fees. Now I'm willing to waive default rent. We want that waived now. It's easy enough to just call them up and say, I'm freaking out. Can I have some help? Take the help, write the check, and move on to the next worry. It's really critical that you get this in writing. Here's the form. Don't worry too much about these forms. You can sign up and get them, and we'll send them to you. That is fine. And here's where you can collect those if you want. You sign up here, and then the forms will get emailed to you. These simple forms may end up being wrong, just like your budget was wrong. You might agree to 1 month abatement, and it turns out you needed 3. That's okay. Keep the conversation going. Just do another one. Nobody knows where this is going. Nobody knows how long this is going to take. Don't be worried that you're locking yourself up by agreeing to something. Understand and talk to your landlord. Say, look, I hope this doesn't have to change. I hope we don't have to do this again. I hope this is the last conversation we have about this. Let me head back here a little bit. I want to talk about the fact that if you are postponing your rent, I want you to lay out some kind of a repayment term. Even if it has to change, it's better than nothing. So put it out there. Say, okay, we're going to not pay rent this month, and then we will start repaying it over 12 months, starting in 90 days. Or if you can't agree, then we will at least, no matter what we do, it won't start again. Rent won't start again for 90 days, 180 days, 120 days. And again, like I said earlier, you may simply have to just revisit that issue. By now, I probably don't need to talk about business interruption insurance. Everybody knows that for the most part, these claims are being denied and their insurance policies explicitly exclude the current circumstances. The advice that I've gotten from insurance attorneys, and I think that might be novel here, is that you should make the claim and get rejected. 2 reasons. One, we're already seeing lawsuits around the country. Famously, the guy down in Napa who owns the French Laundry has sued Hartford, I think it's Hartford, to get his business interruption insurance to pay out. And they're, of course, vigorously defending against that claim. And what I'm hearing is that there might be some kind of class action with some kind of payout someday. So you might as well sign up and get your claim rejected and get that just lodged. Don't count on it, just do it. Practically, the better reason for doing this is I want you to get the rejection so that you can show it to your landlords and your lenders. Yes, I applied for business interruption insurance. I'm sure it's no surprise that claim was rejected. Here, if you need a copy, is the rejection that I got. Your agent, who's busy, may push back and say, "Look, there's no coverage, so I don't want to make the claim." Push them, make the claim anyway. Tell them you need the rejection. Similarly, everyone's discovering that force majeure clauses in leases are different. What I am showing you here is from a lease that we did, and I think that by and large, this is what most of them say. You got to look at your lease, talk to an attorney, take a look at your force majeure clause, but by and large, force majeure exists to excuse you from doing things that you can't do, like open or finish the build out or make the repair, but it doesn't excuse you for the most part from paying rent. Generally speaking, in the world of commercial leasing, we have shifted the risk of an event like this onto the tenants, and that force majeure clause, it's probably not going to be there for you. We're going to see a lot of litigation over this, and I don't want to make a blanket statement that your force majeure clause in your lease doesn't actually help you, but look at it, have a lawyer look at it, but don't be surprised if it says something like this, which is just shall not operate to excuse from prompt payment of rent. All right, your employees are, of course, all freaking out, and who can blame them? On a legal level, what I want to tell you is that if you can pay wages, you want to pay it. And you want to pay it because in most jurisdictions, unpaid wages are personal liabilities of the owner. They are doubled, or claims are 200 or 150% of the unpaid wages. And when we're dealing with a restructure, you come out of this, the most difficult creditors to have are employees with small claims. They are persistent. They post on social media, and they cost you money with your professional. I would rather have, as your restructuring professional, I would rather have one creditor to whom we owe $40,000 than 10 employees to whom we owe $18,000, just because that 10 creditors is so much less manageable. There's just so much more touches that you end up having to make. There are so many things going on with unemployment and everything. I'm punting. Your job is to stay on top of it. All right. Let's talk about your lender. Lenders are generally giving forbearances, is what I'm seeing anecdotally, and what I'm hearing from folks and other professionals that I talk to. But everything they're doing is short term. They're not setting up any kind of repayment structure or finalizing the way these terms are going to go. And if 2008, 2009 taught them anything, it's that the feds are going to show up and bail them out, and so they're not going to want to stretch too much. If you're talking to your lender, similar with your landlord, you want things that you see on the screen waived. Covenant, payment defaults, default interest, late fees. And you don't want the lender to be in a position to be trading all of those things for whatever it is that they want. I'd rather have all of those things washed away so that when you come back and it's time to settle up, all you're talking about is payment terms. You're not talking about all these little things like these little defaults. We don't have a form for you like we did with the with the rent forms, because your lender probably will not accept our form. They're going to want their lawyer to draft it. They're more regulated. It's just, it's a waste of time, we think, for us to be giving you forbearance forms. A word on the world of SBA financing as it exists. I mean, there are so many webinars right now, industry specific, on PPP and 7A emergency loans, that that is really beyond the scope of what we're doing here today. And I'm just going to punt on that. Make the application, get the funds, and how it relates to this webinar is, to the extent that getting those loans is part of your plan, talk to your landlord about it, talk to your lender about it. One of the things that I've found, I should have said this a few slides back, I found it useful to point out to landlords is, yes, we have applied for the PPP loan, but the money's not here today. And we don't know exactly, we know when they're saying it's going to show up, but we don't know when it's going to show up. And so while we may have money in here to pay bills, we don't yet. And we still need help, even if the government is coming to give us money to help pay you. And so stressing that the issue is not one of ultimately getting the loan, but rather is one of cash flow and timing is practical and helpful. It's a good reminder. Surprisingly, they may not have actually thought of that. It's not like we're just going to the ATM and getting the cash out. It's going to take time, and it's not going smoothly because they are setting up a massive, massive lending program across the entire United States. All right. Obviously, I'd like to see you talking to everybody and making deals with everyone. But if you cannot make a deal with your stakeholders, if you got to pick someone not to pay, I suppose it's your lender first. There's a default process. You know, your landlord can typically issue a 3-day notice to quit or pay, go to court and have you gone in a week. Your lender needs to actually sue you to collect. And if you ultimately have to go into some kind of a bankruptcy, we can manage your loan a little bit better. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. If you're on this call and you are a franchisee, what we'll point out is that franchisors have to offer uniform relief. They can't case by case it like landlords and lenders and look at it. They basically have to do the same thing for everybody. And similar to the admonition to get things in writing that we are doing with respect to your landlord and your lender, we'd like to see you get changes in writing. A lot of the franchisors are coming out and moving development schedules and timing on upgrades and remodels. I know they're busy. Try to get it in writing. If you can't get it in writing, get some kind of an email that confirms the change. And don't let it sit. Make yourself a reminder to go back and ask for it in writing in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But don't let it go. Get it in writing so that it's clear what has changed about your particular schedule, so that it's not confusing to everyone, or to anyone, I should say. From a stressed out standpoint, it's easy enough to think, well, I don't have the money for my taxes, so I'm not going to do anything. Try to make your payroll taxes if you can do that. But whether you can make your tax payments or not, whether it's sales tax, unemployment, whatever payroll, file the return anyway. You don't want time to go by and have the authorities file a return for you. They're typically required to file it at the highest of, they take some kind of rolling average and file your return as if you were functioning at the highest level. So you might as well set your obligation to where it ought to be. In some jurisdictions, there's a financial penalty for simply not filing the return. So even if you can't pay it, file it anyway. All right. One of the things, this webinar is basically taking our consult that we've been doing with clients and rolling it out. And so one of the things I'm having them show up and ask, well, should I file a bankruptcy right now? And it's not time. We don't know how long this is going to go. And you don't want to file until you are reasonably confident you've reached the bottom. You want to hold off as long as possible. We don't know what programs are going to come around. We don't know, in your case, how your specific stakeholders will respond. There will be an uneven response. At least what I can say is that this is universal, and that it's not like I have to explain dealing with a hurricane in Florida to an underwriter in Nebraska. Everybody's going to get this. And so what I want you to take away from this is that, to the extent that you have unpaid obligations that are going to trail off behind you as you come out of this and back into operations, I would say that 95% of the time, out-of-court settlements are going to carry the day. You're going to make deals with your creditors, and you are going to just work it out. You're not going to need a bankruptcy. Everybody's in this, and you're probably going to be able to roll up your debt, make a deal with your landlord, and keep going. So I kind of want to take the bankruptcy thing away from folks for now. I know it's on everyone's mind, but it's just not. It's still going to be there, and it's not time yet. All right. Folks show up, and they hear me tell them it's not time to file bankruptcy, but they want to understand a little bit about bankruptcy anyway. And so I think it's fair to say that a lot of bankruptcy attorneys treat bankruptcy like a hammer, and everything they see is a nail. I don't feel that way about bankruptcy, and I don't think it's time to consider filing. However, I'll give you some context about the different types of bankruptcy. And you know, we have spent entire days presenting on the various things I'm going to show you in the next two slides. But just in a nutshell, if you come out of this and you can't manage things with your creditors, and you are staying in business, you know, keep owning your business, you're going to file a Chapter 11. And you want to do that when ideally you want to wait till you've reached the bottom of your revenue decline and you're starting to come back up so that you can make payments. Chapter 7 is for your business. That's something that happens if you're closed and you're not going to reopen. And that typically folks that close and don't reopen, they don't file a Chapter 7 on the business. They just close it and walk away. More likely at that point, they do the next thing on the list, which is file a Chapter 7 for individuals. If you have personally guaranteed debts from the business that you can't pay, you may choose to file a Chapter 7 and discharge those debts. And Chapter 13, and these are broad brush statements, but a Chapter 13 is for individuals. You go out of business and you've got debts that you need to pay over time, but you have assets that aren't exempt. So in every state there's a homestead exemption. You get to keep your home at a certain amount of equity and down. If you have more than that, you're typically going to go into a Chapter 13 and pay out the amount by which your exempt asset exceeds the exemption. And that is a massive oversimplification of Chapter 13, but generally speaking, that's what it's for. We're not planning to file, we're planning to avoid bankruptcy, we're planning to grow. A little bit more on bankruptcy, and what I've done is, please don't come back later and slap me if these estimates are wrong, but I'll just kind of give you a sense of, if you're going to file a bankruptcy, what does that cost? And kind of what are the highs and lows here? What are the points you need to consider? Chapter 11 is something you're going to file if you're going to retain control. You will need to reject bad contracts. Maybe you got a couple of leases that you need to get rid of. Maybe you need to restructure your debt. One of the things that I think we're going to see come into play here is Subchapter 5, which is a new form of bankruptcy, just came into effect this year. And in the CARES Act, Congress increased the limit for that from $2.7 to $7.5 million in total debt. And this, again, is potentially the subject of an entire afternoon, but this is good news because you will be more able to retain your business without having to put in a bunch of new invested money, and you can actually get a plan confirmed in Chapter 11 without your creditors voting for it under this type of bankruptcy. So it's really, and with the increase to 7.5 million, it might actually, for a lot of small businesses, might be a game changer. I think that's possible. Those are the expenses there. All right. When we came out of 2008, 2009, finding a bankruptcy attorney, a good insolvency professional, was challenging. It was like trying to get a contractor to work on your house at the height of the real estate boom. Keep a little cash in the tank for hiring a bankruptcy professional. And it's actually true. In most jurisdictions around the country, a lot of the bankruptcy professionals started in bankruptcy in the 80s when Reagan changed the tax code, and they have been retiring in droves. And I think some of them will maybe come back for this, but there's just a scarcity of really experienced bankruptcy folks. And so keep that in mind. One serious consideration that folks are coming to us with is asset protection and what should they be doing? And nothing serious is my answer. And I know this isn't sexy, but this is not the time to put the cars in the kid's name or transfer the house to your wife or your husband. And the reason is, if you start doing a lot of stuff within a year before you file a bankruptcy, you can lose the ability to actually get your debts discharged in bankruptcy. It's not worth it. And if you put something in a trust, that has to age over time under the bankruptcy laws, so you don't have enough time. And doing sudden, uncharacteristic things is not going to serve you well. And you should just, if you're thinking about doing something like that, please call us, call another bankruptcy attorney, call somebody, get some advice on how to do that. The big takeaway, and the thing I want to make sure you understand, is don't dump out your 401k or your SEP without talking to an attorney. And I'm not saying don't do it, but do it right if you're going to do it. So often people come in and they'll say, oh, well, I've dumped my 401k into the business. And all I can think at that point is, if only you had called me first. Because if that's the move you were going to make, your 401k, nobody can touch that except the IRS. If that's the move you're going to make, I can get things for that. I can trade things for you injecting that amount of cash from that source into your business. So make sure that you're talking to an attorney so that you do it right. And make sure you're talking to an attorney so that it goes into the business correctly. Maybe it's a capital contribution, but maybe it's a loan. And maybe you take a lien on your own business for the money that you put in. And that can assist you substantially in a bankruptcy if you have to file it. So if this is something you're going to do, and I understand how dismaying it is to think that, well, I've only got $100,000 to put in the business, minus whatever I got to spend on some lawyer to do this correctly, and I need all of the money in the business. I get that, but this is a place where saving is not going to serve you. So with all of that in mind, these are the things that you can do: plan, communicate, and I'll leave you with this image. I'm hoping that you can try to be like Forrest Gump after the storm. Hopefully you all remember that movie. Forrest was out in the storm. The entire shrimping fleet was devastated, and Forrest became the only shrimp boat on the bay. And like he said, after that, shrimping was real easy. All right, we're going to open up Q&A and see if we have any questions. from anybody, and I'll, if we get questions, I will stick around and answer them. I see that we have PDF or recording made available. Yeah, go ahead and email me if you want either of those things. I'm happy to do that. And let's see, I'll type in that answer as well. So go ahead and email me. And my email is on the screen. And leave it open for a few more minutes, but if we don't have any more questions, folks can just start to drop off. And we can just say thank you. All right, a couple more minutes for questions. Not hearing any. I would encourage anybody, if you need help, reach out. If we're not the folks to help you, we can find help for you where you are. We've got connections all over the United States, and we've helped franchisees in not all, but most states. So please feel free to contact us. And not getting further questions, so I think we will end the meeting. Oh, here we go. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Someone's giving us some positive feedback. Thank you for that. All right. Having no Q&A, we will end the meeting. Thank you, everyone, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you think you need some help.